Okay, so today we are going to build on our last lesson, classifying and identifying triangles by their sides and by their angles. So let's review the types of triangles and the two ways that we can identify and classify them. So we went through a lesson and we took a look at how to identify or classify triangles by their sides. So an equilateral has three equal sides, and we can see this with the double lines here, almost looking like equal signs. That's an equilateral. Isosceles triangle, it has two equal sides. Well, one way to remember that word isosceles, and it has two equal sides, is that you can think of your eyes. You have two eyes on your face and they're relatively the same size. So isosceles begins with the letter I. So think of it that way. Isosceles has two equal sides. Well, on our face we have two eyes that are equal in size. Okay, and then there's the scalene. Now, the scalene triangle has no equal sides, and we tried to remember this on our last lesson as scales. There's animals that have scales, like iguanas or snakes or dragons, and butterflies also have scales on their wings. So those are all kinds of different animals. And so we can remember that scalene triangle has no equal sides. Like there's all sorts of different animals with scales that are different in size. So scalene, we can remember that way. And then we can also classify triangles by their angles. So there is the acute triangle. It has three acute angles, which are all less than 90 degrees. Then there's the right triangle, and it has one 90 degree, which is exactly 90 degrees, and two lines that form it are perpendicular. They're straight up and down and across. Okay, and then there's the obtuse triangle, and it always has at least one. It has one obtuse angle greater than 90 degrees. And like I said in the last lesson, all triangles have at least two acute angles. So we're going to take this a step further. We're going to take a look at the lesson you're doing today. So here are some patterns. The pattern follows a rule. Right triangle, acute triangle. Right triangle, acute triangle. It also follows a rule of isosceles, scalene, isosceles. So we're going to take a look at this, and I have drawn these out. So here's our rule: right triangle, acute, right triangle, acute triangle, right triangle. So in our lesson, it asks us to draw a triangle that could be next in the pattern, and then explain. So if we're following this pattern, right triangle, acute triangle, right triangle, acute, right, so then the next shape should be an acute. And so on here it does actually show you an acute. So that would be a pattern of following these types of triangles. And you can also call them, they're trying to tell you that you can identify them by their angles. That's why we call them acute or right. There wasn't an obtuse, but they were acute and right. But you can also identify these same triangles as isosceles and scalene. So let's look at number 1 here. Do you understand? Is it possible to have an obtuse acute triangle? Well, no, you can't have an obtuse and an acute, because an acute triangle, all three of the angles are less than 90. And an obtuse, one of the angles is greater than 90, while the other two are acute. So you can't have them the same name. They're either all acute, like the acute triangle, or the obtuse, where one of them is obtuse. It's like apples are apples and oranges are oranges. You can't call an apple an orange or an orange an apple because they're different. Number 2, can a triangle have more than one right angle? Well, we can try and draw these out to see if that's possible. So here is a triangle with exactly one right angle. So I can attach it here. But can I have two right angles? Okay, so here we go. Here is my triangle. It is a right triangle. But can I come up with two? Well, I can try and do this. All right, there is my right. Here's my box indicating these are perpendicular. But I can't make another right angle there because there's no way there's no way I can do this. They're always going to be acute over here. And if I tried to do it and did this here, then I would actually have to be making, here's my right angle with the two perpendicular, the lines that make perpendicular, and I would end up making really some kind of a square or a rectangle, and I can't make a triangle that has two right angles in it. So the answer is no, it can't be done. All right, now we're going to classify each of these triangles by its sides and by its angle. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and take a look at these. In number 3 here, we're going to actually use your note. You can use your note taking from yesterday's where all the angles are given to you and its identification, or if you have this from the anchor chart, you can also have that and just lay it out there to help you along. And we're going to take a look at each one of these types of triangles. Okay, and try to identify it by its sides. So I look here at number 3, and I see there's two lines indicating that these two sides are equal. Well, then I think about, well, what triangle has two sides that are equal? Well, then I remember I have two eyes on my face that are equal. That means it's an isosceles. So this one can be identified as an isosceles. Okay, so it could be an isosceles by its sides, but then what about its angles? Well, all three of these angles are acute, so it can also be identified as an acute triangle. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at number 4. Number 4 I can see has 3 equal sides. Well, there's only one triangle that all the sides are equal, and that is the equilateral. So we can identify this triangle by its sides as an equilateral triangle. But if you take a look at its angles, all three of its angles are acute or less than 90 degrees. So it can also be identified as an acute triangle. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at number 5. And number 5 here has a nice little square in there, a little box. So we know that it is, those two lines are perpendicular. And number 5, we can identify that as an right triangle if we're going just by angles. But what about its sides? So let's take a look at its sides here. It appears that these 3 sides are all different. Okay, this one is short, this one is long, and this one, because it's in an angle, it's probably longer than the other 2. So what do we call a triangle that all 3 sides are different lengths? Well, I remember scales. There are different kinds of animals that have different scales on it. So that reminds me of scalene. So I'm going to call this the scalene triangle. So number 5 is scalene and right. And we take a look at number 6. When I look at the sides again, oh my, they're all different measurements for the sides. So again, I'm going to have a scalene. Scalene meaning all the sides are of different lengths. And when I take a really good look at number 6, I notice that the angle for number 6 right here is an obtuse. It is greater than 90 degrees. So by angles, I could call this an obtuse triangle. So we're going to take a look at number 7. Number 7 is a little easier. We right away see that 2 of the sides are equal and indicated by the little lines here, letting us know they're equal. Well, what triangle have 2 equal sides? Well, I think again about 2 eyes on my face. And so, and the eyes are of relative same size. So I have an isosceles triangle. Okay, and then because it does have that square indicating it is also a right triangle. Number 8, I take a look at it again and we see it has a square in there indicating it has 2 perpendicular sides and the sides are equal. So again, I have an isosceles and a right triangle. When I look at number 9, well, here I notice again it's similar to number 5, but I don't have a box in there indicating that I have exactly perpendicular lines. But all the sides seem to be different, so by their sides I have a scalene. And since I don't have a box in there, I'm going to have to do a measuring. So I'm going to grab my little tool here and I'm going to put it right in there, and yep, it fits in there exactly. So I do have a right triangle because it has a 90-degree angle in there. All right, so now I have number 10 and it's the house, and we're looking at the roof. Again, we see these 2 sides are equal. So I know right away I have an isosceles because isosceles reminds me of 2 eyes. I have 2 eyes that are equal length, so I have an isosceles triangle. And I also have, appears to be, let's see, we're going to check this out, this angle. Oh yeah. So when we take a look at this side is a little bit wider and it doesn't fit quite perfectly into my square. So that is an obtuse angle right up here. So that means I also have an obtuse triangle. So take a look at your notes and get yourself familiarized with the types of triangles and how they're classified.